Hello and welcome back to the ECS tutorial. I've got a little bit of an addendum here. So community member SOS recommended an alternate query run function that would make it a little bit easier for the user in their ECS systems that they would create in the the app, whatever game or other system that they're going to use to create for this. So in the conversation, this is sort of what it's going to look like. Basically, we return some kind of struct from the query that then we can run a function like get component on, and then it would provide, like, then you just get the component right there. It would do all the downcasts inside of it. So I want to implement this into our system, sort of like next to what we have right now as like an example of how this works. However, if you'd like to go check out SOS and see their GitHub, I have a link to that inside of the code base, which is now going to be there. All right, let's go ahead and get started by creating a test for this. So first one is, this is going to be a get a reference. That's going to be the query, just to get a reference only. So this is going to be query like entity query for entity. Just call this a ref. We're going to turn a result. And we don't really care what's inside of that. All right, so first things first, we need to sort of like just spin up the entities and get that all set up. So let's do a let mut entities equals entities default. We're gonna need to register some components. Entities dot register components. And let's do a U32 and let's also do an F32. So we'll have two of them there so we can make sure that our sort of like query does the right thing and doesn't like somehow miss some steps. Okay, so once we've registered those components, we should be able to now insert a couple of entities in. So let's do entities dot create entity with component. We just need one component each for these. So let's say that's like health. So we have like a 100 U32. I don't think, does he return? You do return a result. Okay, and let's do another entities, create entity. So we'll just do one of each. So with component, and you'll be maybe like I don't know, a like how hard you hit or something like that. So do like a 10 .0 F32. All right, so we've now created our components. We should be able to query for these out of the entire system. Okay, so we know we want to create a new query. So let mut query equals query new. We also know this takes in a reference to the entities, and that gives us a query here. Then we want to sort of like configure our query. So that's going to be our query dot with component. Now let's just only search for this U32 here. So U32. That's all we want to do. And now normally we'd be able to do like either another with component or just this run. So let's actually, instead of run here, let's create this like a run entity. So it'll be, sitting alongside that run function. And then I don't think we necessarily need to pass this anything. It's probably going to return a run would normally return a result. So let's go ahead and return a result here also. Now, if we do this, we now expect that we're going to get a vector of like the full entities that's going to give us, well, whatever we need out of here. Okay, so let's do let entities, like entity components almost. It's really just sort of like a wrapper that's going to give access to these other things. So let's do entities equals. Now, what are we actually going to expect to get out of here? Let's go ahead and set this up too. We know we're going to want this to be some kind of vector. And we know you want to have some kind of like entity in here. So let's call this like a query entity. Now that doesn't exist yet, so that's gonna be fine. But let's like run through like how this entire thing is gonna work here. Okay, so we have our query entity. We're running the entity that gets us this vector of these. Now I should be able to loop through these. So for entity in entities, I should be able to take ownership of this because this query is really going to just do some stuff behind the scenes to grab like the references or the mutable references. Okay, so we're going to loop through this. Now it's going to be this query entity. We still don't know what that is right now. But for each one of these, we need to have the index on it. The index on it is important because that allows us to sort of like grab what the very like the things that we need out of it. So I think that's going to be helpful. Let's double check that we have the ID. So we're going to assert equal that entity.id is equal to, well, we know that this is going to be a 0 because it's the first component out of here. Okay, so that gives us that. Now the other things are we want to be able to run this function to sort of get the component. So we're going to do let probably our component. Now specifically, I want to get like the actual thing. So let's just do like a health. Now what's the type of health going to be? It's going to be a ref because after we borrow and downcast, we just get a ref of it. This is going to be a ref of U32. So I want that is going to be equal to entity.get component. Now we have to give it in the type in order to like make sure, because if we're querying for multiple things in this query, like it has multiple components that we're trying to get, then we still need to get like each one out here. So we're gonna say I want a U32, and we're probably gonna have to question mark this. I don't know if we need to pass in anything else. I think that it should store everything that it needs internally to have this work. Okay, so then we have our health. We should just assert that this is the right health. So we're going to assert equal that a dereferenced health is equal to 100. And that should be it for the testing wise. We might have to come in here and like change the little things here and there as we figure it out. But until then, we need to make these errors go away. So first, we don't have a query entity. Let's go ahead and fix that. So in entities here, we're going to create a query entity.rs. Now to make this sort of visible as a module, we have to come back here into entities and add that in here. So pub, and I don't know if this, yeah, this is going to need to be pub so that way people can get access to it and sort of like see what that is. So pub mod query entity and a pub struct query entity. If we remember, we need an ID on here. So an ID is going to be a usize because it really is just that index. And you need to be public so we can have access to you. Back to query, we need access to this. So I'm just going to import you. And there we go. Okay, so we got that. Next up, we need this run entity method that's going to return this vector. So let's go ahead and scroll up and go add in right below this run function. So pub function run entity. We're just going to take in a reference to self and nothing else. We know we're going to turn a vec of query entity. And so let's just return an empty vector for right now, just to make that that error go away. All right, what's next? You also, oh, it's not just run entity returns a result. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're doing that correct. So you are a result of this. Okay. And you need to be an okay. Wrapped around this vector. All right, what's last? And then we need this method get component that takes in a type and returns this ref. That might be a little bit more interesting to do, but let's go ahead and implement that. I don't actually think I need you. Okay, so we know we need a pub function. What was this? This was get component. Get component. On top of here, we need just a reference to self. I don't think we need anything else, but we did notice that we need to take in a type. Now that type is going to have to implement any, because we need to get the type ID off of it to get access to the components from the hash map. We also know we're going to have to return a ref that's going to be this type T inside of it. All right, so that works. Now let's just go ahead and just mark this as to do for right now. So it won't yell at us. Let's bring in any so it knows what that is. Obviously this will crash if we try to run it, but oh, and it's a result off of here. So it's not just and ref, it's a result, which needs to be an error result. And then that's going to store this ref inside of here. Okay, so no errors showing up here anymore. Let's go ahead and now just start like actually running this and then fixing things as they sort of come up. We know we're going to get into a lot of troubles because we don't actually have anything showing up here, do we? So if I run you, well, actually everything passes, doesn't it? It passes because we have an empty vector, meaning it never goes into this loop, meaning that never actually hits these asserts. Let's add an assert here. So we're going to assert equal that the entities.length is equal to 1. So that way, in case we don't have that there, we're not like querying for anything at all, it still fails on us, which now it is. Left and right do not equal. Perfect. Okay, so now we actually have to do the query to get this this query entity back. So let's go into our query up here, and we can kind of just steal a bunch from run. Let's just copy this entire function here and just sort of like see what we need to get, because right now we need to return a result with like not this tuple, but rather the oh, what is it called? It's going to be the this query entity method. Okay. Okay, so first we get the indexes. I think that's exactly the same. I don't think we have to change anything at all here. We're going to get the vector of the indexes. However, I don't think we need to start collecting the results here. And in fact, thinking about this a little bit, we don't need to get the type ID to actually get the components out. So I don't think we need to do any of this stuff. Now I have this collection happening. And then looking at this, I don't think we actually need this to be a result. I think we can actually get away with just the plain vector here, which means we can just return straight from this. We'll have collect turn this into a vector of query entities, which means we need to put that in here. So instead of this index here, we're going to do a query entity. Now, we need to like store in the ID, and I could just put in ID is the index here. That should work, but I also want to clean that up. Let's verify that that's working right now. Right now, let's an entity. We're going to remove that question mark, and you're happy. But I'm kind of more of a fan of using a constructors for this. Let's create a really quick one here. So pub function new. We're going to take in the ID, which is a usize, and we're going to return a self. Self with the ID. Okay, nice and simple, but that allows us to up here in this sum, we're just going to do a new and pass it in the index. And that's it. Now that allows us to return this because the collect takes all of these sums from the filter map and turns it into the vector of query entities. So far, so good. Let's come back down here and rerun this and see where the next thing we need to fix is. Okay, so now we get this not yet implemented. So what happened? We do the query. We got the one thing that we're looking for. So that's great. Then we get our entity in entities. And okay, so we got past this. Now get component, we try to run that, and that is that's not yet implemented. So we need to fix that now. So let's take a look at this. We need to do entity, get component, we pass in the type, we get a result, and then this refs. This actually gets the actual thing. All right, so let's go ahead and now implement this function properly. So if I want to get the component, what do I need to do? Well, I have the ID. So I can like grab the ID from the actual component vector from the component's, vector. But I need to actually extract that out. So how can I get access to the entities? Well, we're creating the query entity. So I think actually we can get away with just storing the entities in here. So, and this doesn't need to be public. This can be just like private to query entity, and it could just be a reference to it. So we're going to have the entities, and you're going to be a reference to entities. Now, of course, if I do a reference inside of a struct like this, I need to have some lifetimes. Let's go ahead and set them up. So the a lifetime there. Let's go ahead and also implement some lifetimes here. And we're going to have the entities, which is going to be a reference with this lifetime for the entities. And we're just going to store them inside of here. So this will be happy here, although up here, we now need to also pass in the self.entities. Now, notice like we're running stuff off of self.entities, but because we're just running it on a immutable state, which is just a reference to it, and we're not mutating anything at all as far as Rust is concerned, that this is perfectly legal, and the borrow checker is going to be happy with us. So back to our query entity. Now we're storing away the entities, but I think this is now everything that we need to get. It's just yelling at us that we're not using it yet. Okay, fine. So what do we really need to do here? First of all, we need to get the type ID so we can query for the vector of components. So let the type ID, it's going to be equal to, I'm going to do type ID of, pass it that type. Okay, so now that we have that type ID, we should be able to get the actual component out. So let our components, it's going to be equal to self.entities.components.get, pass it in a reference to that type ID. Now this is going to give us an option here. So what do I need to do with this? I want to kind of convert this into a result, so that way we can turn an error in the case that for some reason the type that we're passing in isn't correct, like isn't something that we can actually get. So with options, we can do that with an okay or, and then pass it in some kind of error state for this. Well, let's actually go to our custom errors and add in a new custom error here. So we have entity does not exist, component not registered. Actually, that one might be right. We're attempting to reference a component that wasn't registered. So let's do this one, component not registered. So back to you. We're going to do a custom errors, component not registered. And we don't need to do anything else special with this, but notice that this is now attempting to return a result. So I'm going to go ahead and question mark that. And so now we have a reference to these this vector. Okay, so now we can get the specific component out that we're looking for. So let component is equal to the components of self.id. So it's nice that we like stored that away. We don't have to ask for it separately here. Now that gives us another option in here, because each of them have these options, but we know that it should definitely exist. There should not be any like way that this fails, but just in case it does, because sometimes things that are impossible tend to happen. Entity does not exist. How about component does not exist? So if we do component does not exist, and then we add in this error, attempting to get a component that does not, I guess component data does not exist, maybe. Get component data that does not exist. We're going to now convert this option into another result here. So let's do another okay or, and this is going to be that custom errors, component data does not exist. And okay, so that gives us this RC now. Now I need to borrow off of the ref cell to get a ref. So I think we can just go ahead and borrow straight off of here. That gives us this ref dine any. We do need to do a downcast for this too. So you're now a borrowed component. And then we need to figure out how to like, well, I can downcast. That's no problem. Let's go ahead and just do let our component equals the borrowed component downcast ref. We do need to tell it what we're downcasting into, which is why we have this type here. that gives us another option. So let's go ahead and we can unwrap it, or it's like maybe the wrong type. We can give it another custom error here. So attempting to downcast to the wrong type. So let's see. Downcast to wrong type. We'll do an okay or custom errors, downcast to wrong type, question mark that. Okay, now I have this reference to a T, but I need actually to have it be the ref of the T itself. If I try to do the T itself, it's going to yell at us that, well, we can't really do that because then it's like we're getting ownership of it, and it's a sort of like a messy thing. So I actually want to keep it as the ref. So maybe this isn't exactly what we need here. There's a really cool sort of like system that we can do here. Let's see. So after we borrow, I want to maybe not do the full downcast just out here at this level. Let's go take a look at the documentation for ref and see if there's anything that can help us out here. Specifically, this map I think is going to help us out. So makes a new ref for a component of the borrowed data. The ref cell is already immutably borrowed, so it cannot fail. It's an associated function that can be used, so it's basically a static method essentially. But it allows us to sort of like clone things over without like it's nice. It's I don't really know like the best way to sort of like explain what's happening here. But let's go ahead and use it, and we'll see how nice this actually is. So instead of this component being done like that, let's go ahead and reset this a little bit. We're going to just straight return from here. So we're going to get that okay for the result. And then from there, we're going to take this ref, and then we're going to map. Now it takes the original, which is this borrowed component, and then a callback function here, or a closure. Okay, so what do we want to do here? We need to basically take our borrowed component and we're gonna get like the thing in here. So is this anything? So we need to downcast it at this point. We're gonna take this, whatever it is, this data, this any data, and we're gonna downcast ref. Tell it to go into this type T that's passed into us. And then at this point, I think we don't have a choice but to unwrap it. Because if I try to do like a bail or any other like custom errors, it unfortunately is going to error out to this method and not up to here. So it's an unfortunate unwrap that we haven't figured out how to get around. So if we save you, let's go ahead and see like what problems we're running into. Cannot move out of index. Okay, so I can just get an as ref maybe. At this point, I just getting a reference to this should probably be fine. This borrowed content. Expected to struct a ref, found a reference. Can I just dereference you? And then cannot return a value referencing temporary value. Okay, so cannot move out of the borrowed content. Oh, there's a method that we can use, I believe. We have this okay or I think it's like an as ref here. That makes it happy. So we're going to take this components that gives us this option with the RC ref cell. we then do the as ref, which moves things around. So it's now this option with the reference on the inside of the RC. Then we can do the entire OKR to convert this option into a result, which then we can then do the borrow here, question mark and borrow. So that seems to be working now. We don't have any errors. Let's go ahead and come back to our test and run this and see what works. Well, it's actually passing. We're now able to get exactly what we want. Now, just to make sure that we're not like, we didn't do something wrong, I'm going to go ahead and change that to 101 and we should get an error. And we do. So we're able to actually just get the full query, get the full item out that we want at this time because kind of what we're expecting here. So it makes querying a little bit nicer from the user's perspective. Okay, so that's for ref, but what if we want to do mutable? What if we want to change things? Let's go ahead and copy this, this function again. And we're now going to add a mute version. Now we don't need to change anything with the query itself. Everything is going to remain the same up until, let's see, got that somewhere down here. So we're looping through our entities. We assert that the ID is 0. Okay, we get the health. Now we assume that you should be a ref mute. We're going to get component mute. With that U32, that should be the same. We should assert equal that you're 101. Well, let's actually let's make a change to you. It's okay to like make sure. Okay, you're 101. Let's now change you. So if I do a dereferenced health plus equals to 1, so now you should be 101. Now, just to make sure that this actually is like sort of really happening behind the scenes, let's just do another query again. And so I'm going to repeat this query here. So we already have our query here. I didn't shadow anything. So I kind of want to just run you again. I don't need to assert that we know that you're working. We're going to do another loop through here. Don't need to check that. We know you're working. So for this one, we're going to get you as just a ref again. So get component, and then we're going to assert equal that you are 101 now and not change you again. So that's what we want to do here. Now you're yelling at us that get component mute doesn't exist. So let's fix that. So pub function get component mute. I think actually a lot of this is going to be the same. So let's actually just copy and paste this and see what we can do. So to begin with, get component, you're going to now be a mute, a result. So we're going to have a ref mute here. Instead, we do need to pull in this type so it knows what that is. The type ID is going to be the same. The components is going to be the same here. Now the borrowed component, this needs to be a ref mute at this point in time. So as ref, probably as mute. And we need to borrow mute here. And then down here, we need to do a ref mute map. Borrowed component, we get our any. We need to downcast mute. And these components, okay, our components need to be mutable too. Cannot borrow dereference components mutables behind a let's see, as mute. Okay, or we do the borrow mute there. You don't actually want to be, do you need to be a get mute here? No, because we can't actually borrow this as mutable. So we can't do that. So you're just a normal get. Let's come back. Let's go through one at a time. Maybe it's not quite as simple as just like going in and changing everything around. Let's actually think about what we really need to have happen. So we have this borrowed components. We're going to take the components. We're going to take that ID. We have this option RC ref cell. This all seems to be fine at this point in time. Now, as mute gives us a mute RC. I don't think we need to do that. I think this can stay as an as ref here, because really we're just going to borrow mute at this point in time, which gives us the ref mute here. And then we're going to do the ref mute map, and this seems to be working. There's no errors here. Let's come back to our query. You are yelling at us because we can't borrow health as mutable because it's not set as mutable. Let's do that here. And you seem to be working. Let's go ahead and run you. And oh, it passes. So that means that we are able to sort of update and mutate that that variable, that data inside of the components, without having to do all that ref mute stuff in the system itself, which is really nice. Now we have a bunch of sort of like shared code here. I wonder if there is a way for us to sort of like have this be like sort of similar here. Let's take a look and see what we can do. We have the borrowed component. Now this is going to be a ref, and this is a ref mute. Does mean that as ref, okay, or, and then a borrow. Well, the big difference is this borrow mute is here. So we may not be able to change this line and down on each function, but these two lines are exactly the same. So I wonder if I can create like a get components. So sort of like query for components, get them internally. Let's do a function, maybe like extract components. We do need this T. It's going to implement any. We're going to be a reference to self, and I don't think we need anything else stored in. Now we're going to return this sort of nasty thing here. So let's go ahead and write that down. So you're going to be a reference, and that may or may not work out well for us, because if it wants it to be a reference to a vector, we'll have to see. This may or may not work. Have our option, which then itself has an RC, which then that self has the ref cell, which then that has the dyn any. Okay, so I want to just take these two lines, extract you into here, and let's see if we can just do that components equals self dot extract components. We do need to pass in this T, and that's it. No, this has to be we have a question mark here. So we're gonna have to question mark that, which means you need to be a result here as well. And you, cannot find the RC type, so let's import RC and ref cell. And you are mismatched types. Okay, so we have this components coming in here. Let's go ahead and actually, I don't know if I need to do anything more than just return the result of this. All right, so try expectation have incompatible types, expected this result with the vec. So it looks like we have reference to the vec, then an option, then an RC, a ref cell, and then a dyn any. That looks appropriate. Oh, and then error report. I do have error result. That should work out here. Now oh wait, take away that question mark. And then you, okay, so we need to make sure that you are exactly what I want to be. So we need to change you into an okay or else, because if I try to just do like an into here to convert it into the appropriate error result, it's going to yell at us and say, hey, if we're going to do any like function calls or any kind of logic in here, we should do the okay or else. So let's go ahead and change that into there, and then you now will work. So you are a complex type. So it doesn't really like this. Let's go ahead and change, like, we're going to create our own type in here. So we're going to do a type. This is like an extracted components maybe. So like extracted components is going to equal to this entire nasty thing. Then from that, we can now replace you with an extracted components. All right, so now we can see that we got that out, extract components, and there's our type coming in. So we can replace that down here as well. So let components is equal to self dot extract components, pass in that T, and question mark it. And we're good to go. You are upset. Oh, missing lifetime. I guess, do we have to do a lifetime here? We do. Okay, and then it should be happy. Let's go back one last time, run this test, and we'll run the entire suite of tests to make sure we didn't break anything at all. So that passed. And we're just going to open up a terminal and do a cargo test. Everything should pass now, and it does. So which means we've implemented a much nicer interface for queries that sort of like runs along the much less nicer default way that I had in the course. So next steps, if you want to sort of like try to make it even nicer on the user side, perhaps looking into creating some macros. That's outside of the scope of this course, so we're not going to include that here. Maybe in a future course we'll talk about macros. And then perhaps like going right through and looking at some of the other methods, other sort of like areas that we're using things, and how can we clean them up, make it a little bit nicer so we don't have to do downcast and other things inside of the user's code. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.